Joran Thal had always believed that humanity's greatest strength and greatest flaw was its adaptability. Since the arrival of the Highland 10 years ago, Earth had undergone transformations few could have imagined. Cities once bustling with human activity now glittered with the bioluminescent architecture of their alien visitors. Trade agreements had introduced revolutionary technologies, but they had also unearthed deep divides. Not everyone welcomed the newcomers, and tension simmered beneath the surface of this uneasy alliance. For Joran, life in the xenobiology labs of the Earth-Highland Exchange Initiative provided an escape from the political chaos. He thrived in the quiet hum of the lab, studying Highland physiology and unraveling the mysteries of their unique biochemistry. Their bodies were living works of art, skin that shimmered like liquid metal, luminous veins pulsing with color. But their culture remained an enigma, with traditions and gestures that seemed inscrutable even to seasoned diplomats. That evening, Joran was engrossed in a project, his workstation lit by the soft blue glow of Highland data crystals. He was examining samples of their dermal secretions, part of an ongoing study into their regenerative properties, when his comlink chimed. The message was terse, a royal summons to the chambers of Queen Seralith. His heart skipped a beat. A summons from the Highland monarch was no trivial matter. As he navigated the winding corridors of the shared embassy grounds, Joran's mind raced. Why him? His work was important, but it was hardly the stuff of royal interest. Did they need medical insight? Perhaps she'd fallen ill or had questions about human anatomy. The possibilities churned in his mind, each more implausible than the last. The doors to the Queen's chambers slid open with a low hum, revealing a space that seemed alive with movement. Tendrils of light danced across the walls, mimicking the ebb and flow of an ocean tide. Queen Seralith stood at the center of the room, her towering form both regal and intimidating. Her silvery skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, and her eyes, like twin moons, locked onto Joran with unsettling precision. Joran Thal, she said, her voice a symphony of tones, both melodic and commanding. You have arrived. He bowed awkwardly, his movements stiff with nerves. Your Majesty, you summoned me? I did, she replied, her head tilting slightly in a gesture he couldn't interpret. You are familiar with our customs, yes? As much as my studies allow, though there is still much I don't fully understand. Her lips curled into what he could only guess was amusement. Then this will be a learning experience for you. Joran's pulse quickened as she stepped closer, the air around her humming faintly with the energy her body emitted. The Highland had a presence that was difficult to describe, an aura that felt simultaneously calming and intimidating. I require a favor, she continued. One that requires discretion and trust. Of course, Your Majesty. I'll assist in any way I can. The words left his mouth before he fully processed them, his instinct to comply overriding his better judgment. Her gaze remained steady, unreadable. I need you to scrub my back. The room seemed to fall silent. Joran blinked, convinced he must have misunderstood. Pardon me. A back scrub, she repeated, her tone unchanging. It is a ritual among my people, a gesture of trust and alliance. As my trusted researcher, you are uniquely suited for this task. Joran stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of confusion. Of all the possibilities he had imagined, this had not even crossed the periphery. His scientific curiosity clashed with his deeply ingrained sense of propriety. Was this some kind of test? A diplomatic trap? The Queen's luminous eyes narrowed slightly, her skin shifting to a soft gold, a color Joran recognized as mild impatience. Do you refuse? No, Your Majesty, he blurted, his voice cracking slightly. I just wasn't expecting such a request. Few do, she said, a flicker of amusement returning to her expression. But you will learn. Fetch the cleansing oils from the shelf. He moved on autopilot, retrieving a set of ornate vials from a shelf that seemed to materialize from the chamber walls. Each vial contained a viscous liquid that shimmered with iridescent hues. As he returned to the Queen, she turned away from him, the long, elegant tendrils that extended from her crown cascading down her back like liquid silver. Begin, she commanded, her tone softer now, almost inviting. Joran hesitated only a moment before pouring a small amount of the oil onto his hands. As he pressed his palms to her back, the warmth of her skin surprised him. The texture was unlike anything he had ever encountered, smooth yet yielding, with a faint ripple of energy that seemed to dance beneath his fingertips. As he worked, the room filled with an ambient glow, the colors on her skin shifting in response to his movements. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. Each stroke revealed new patterns, intricate designs that seemed to tell a story he couldn't quite decipher. "Your touch is uncertain," Seralith remarked, her voice breaking the silence. "Why do humans fear contact?" "We're not accustomed to this level of intimacy with someone of your status," Joran admitted, his cheeks flushing despite himself. "In human culture, physical contact is often reserved for close relationships." "Fascinating," she mused. "To us, the act of touch is a declaration of trust. It is how we convey emotions that words cannot." Her words stirred something in Joran. He had always approached the Highland with clinical detachment, viewing them as subjects of study rather than individuals. But now, with his hands tracing the intricate lines of her form, he began to see her in a new light, not just as a monarch, but as a being with depth, vulnerability, and complexity. "Tell me, Joran Thal," she said after a long pause, "what do you see when you look at us?" The question caught him off guard. "I see a species unlike any other," he replied carefully. "Elegant, intelligent, and mysterious." Her skin shifted to a deep violet, a color he hadn't encountered before. "Mysterious, indeed," she echoed. "And yet, perhaps we are not so different." As the ritual concluded, Joran stepped back, his hands still tingling from the energy that seemed to linger on her skin. Seralith turned to face him, her expression inscrutable. "You have done well," she said simply. "But this is only the beginning." Joran swallowed hard, his mind racing with questions. What had he just participated in? And what did the Queen mean by only the beginning? He would soon find out that this single act of trust would set in motion events that would change not only his life but the fragile alliance between their species. The next morning, Joran awoke with a restless energy. Sleep had eluded him as he replayed the events in Queen Seralith's chambers over and over. He'd scrubbed the back of an alien queen, a task so surreal it felt like a fever dream. Yet, it was her words afterward, "This is only the beginning," that left him uneasy. As he walked through the embassy grounds, the air buzzed with its usual hum of activity. Highland engineers worked alongside human technicians, their combined efforts forging a fragile but promising alliance. The bioluminescent flora planted by the Highland glowed faintly under the morning sun, casting soft shadows on the human-made walkways. Joran's world felt both familiar and alien, much like his thoughts. "Joran Thal." The voice was unmistakable. Turning, he saw Varen, one of Queen Seralith's most trusted advisors, approaching. The Highland counselor moved with the grace of a predator, his silver-tinted form radiating an intensity that always set Joran on edge. "The Queen requests your presence again," Varen said, his tone curt. Joran's stomach churned. "Another summons?" He nodded, masking his apprehension. "Of course. I'll go immediately." When Joran arrived, Queen Seralith was seated on an elevated platform that pulsed with light, her posture as regal as ever. Beside her, a table of intricate carvings displayed objects that looked like tools or artifacts. "Joran Thal," she greeted, her voice melodic but firm. "You fulfilled my request yesterday with competence. Today, I require your assistance once more." He inclined his head respectfully. "I'm at your service, your majesty." Her eyes locked onto his, piercing yet unreadable. "Good. Today, we venture deeper." Before he could ask what that meant, she gestured toward the table. The objects, he realized, were various instruments of unknown purpose, some appearing ceremonial, others more utilitarian. Seralith picked up a small orb that pulsed with a faint blue light. "This," she said, holding it out to him, "is a Karen orb. It is used to attune our energies during rituals of bonding." Joran hesitated, his scientific curiosity battling with his lingering discomfort. "Bonding?" he asked carefully. "In our culture," she explained, "true alliances are forged not through words, but through shared energy. The Karen orb allows for a momentary merging of our life forces. It is a sacred practice, rarely performed with outsiders." Joran's heart pounded in his chest. The implications were staggering. Was this a test of his loyalty? Or something deeper? "What happens during this merging?" he asked, his voice steady despite his unease. "You will experience what I experience," she said simply. and I will feel what you feel. It is a temporary connection, but it is profound. He glanced at the orb, then back at Serelith. And if I refuse? Her expression didn't change, but the faintest shift in her skin, a flicker of gold, hinted at disappointment. You may refuse, but it would signal to my people that humanity is unwilling to truly understand us. Trust must be mutual, Joran Thal. The weight of her words settled heavily on him. If he refused, it could strain the fragile peace between their species. If he accepted, he would be stepping into the unknown, vulnerable in a way he had never been before. I'll do it, he said finally, his voice resolute. What do I need to do? Serelith's lips curved into what he could only interpret as approval. Hold the orb and focus. I will guide the connection. As soon as Joran grasped the orb, a surge of energy coursed through him. It was neither painful nor pleasant, but an overwhelming sensation that seemed to bypass his body and sink directly into his mind. He closed his eyes as images, sounds, and emotions flooded his consciousness. At first, the sensations were disjointed, a kaleidoscope of light and sound. But gradually, they coalesced into something coherent. He saw glimpses of Serelith's world, vast oceans of liquid silver, skies that shimmered with hues no human language could describe. He felt the weight of her responsibilities as a queen, the constant pressure to lead her people and preserve their way of life. Beneath her regal exterior was a deep well of loneliness, a yearning for connection that she could rarely express. And then, he felt her perception of him, curiosity tinged with skepticism, but also a growing sense of trust. She admired his willingness to step into the unknown, even as he grappled with his own doubts. When the connection ended, Joran opened his eyes, gasping for breath. The orb in his hand had dimmed, its light now faint and steady. Serelith studied him, her expression softer than he had ever seen. You felt it, didn't you? The bond. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't expect it to be so intense. Few do, she said, her tone almost gentle. Now you understand why trust is sacred to us. The experience left Joran shaken but also deeply moved. For the first time, he saw the Highland not just as a species to study, but as individuals with emotions and complexities as profound as his own. But as he prepared to leave, Serelith's parting words echoed in his mind. This bond is the first step. Greater challenges lie ahead, and you will face them not as an observer, but as my ally. The embassy's serene harmony was shattered days later when an explosion ripped through the southern wing. The blast rocked the foundation of the Earth-Highland exchange grounds, sending tremors both physical and metaphorical through the fragile alliance. Smoke billowed into the air as alarms blared, their sharp tones mingling with the cries of confusion and panic. Joran had been in the laboratory, poring over new samples of Highland cellular structures, when the shockwave hit. The force knocked him to the floor, and the crystalline equipment around him shattered into shards that gleamed like tiny stars scattered across the floor. Dazed but uninjured, he stumbled to his feet. His comlink buzzed urgently with a message from Central Command. Evacuate all personnel to designated safe zones. Casualties reported. Cause unknown. Joran's heart raced. His first thought was of Queen Serelith. Was she safe? He didn't trust the automated updates to provide clear answers. Ignoring protocol, he sprinted through the smoke-filled corridors toward the royal chambers, his mind a chaotic storm of fear and determination. When Joran reached the Queen's chambers, he found her surrounded by her advisors, her radiant form dimmed by an aura of worry. The luminescent patterns on her skin fluctuated erratically, a visual manifestation of her inner turmoil. Joran Thal, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a beacon. You are unharmed. Yes, your majesty, he said breathlessly. What happened? Varen, the ever-suspicious counselor, interjected before Serelith could respond. What happened is treachery. The human's negligence has cost us lives. That's not fair, Joran shot back, his tone sharp. We don't even know the cause yet. Serelith raised a hand, silencing them both. This is no time for accusations. We must uncover the truth before trust erodes further. But the damage was already done. Whispers of distrust rippled through the embassy. Highland dignitaries murmured about sabotage, while humans speculated about an internal Highland dispute. Both sides were quick to point fingers, and the tension that had simmered beneath the surface now threatened to boil over. In the following days, investigations revealed a disturbing clue: fragments of a detonator bearing the faint bio-signature of a Hylan. The revelation sent shockwaves through both camps. To the humans, it suggested an internal Hylan faction might be trying to undermine the alliance. To the Hylan, it hinted at a human frame job designed to sow discord. Joran found himself caught in the crossfire. His unique position as both a trusted human researcher and an emerging confidant of the Queen made him a target for scrutiny from both sides. Even Varen, who had tolerated Joran's presence, grew openly hostile. "You bring him into our sacred rituals, and now this," Varen hissed during a council meeting, his luminous eyes narrowed at Serelith. "Do you not see the danger in trusting one of them so blindly?" Serelith's voice was cold as ice. "You forget yourself, Varen. Joran Thal has proven his loyalty. Your accusations are unfounded." But even as she defended him, Joran couldn't help but feel the weight of the Council's distrust. His every move was watched, every interaction scrutinized. The alliance he had worked so hard to nurture was unraveling before his eyes, and he felt powerless to stop it. One evening, as Joran reviewed the investigation data in the lab, Serelith entered silently, her presence filling the room like a warm tide. Her skin glowed with a muted silver, her usual radiance dimmed by exhaustion. "You are troubled," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard. "How could I not be?" he replied, looking up from his screen. "This alliance is falling apart, and I feel like I'm at the center of it." She studied him for a moment before speaking. "Do you know why I chose you, Joran Thal?" He shook his head. "Honestly, I've been wondering that myself." She stepped closer, her gaze piercing yet kind. "Because you see us not as enemies or allies, but as beings. You seek to understand us, even when it is uncomfortable. That is a rare quality, even among my own people." Her words stirred something in him, a flicker of hope in the midst of despair. "But understanding doesn't seem to be enough. Not when there's so much mistrust." "Then we must go beyond understanding," she said firmly. "We must act." Serelith revealed her plan, a diplomatic mission to a remote Hylan enclave believed to harbor members of the rogue faction. She needed someone who could bridge the gap between their species, someone she could trust implicitly. She needed Joran. "It will be dangerous," she warned. "If the culprits are there, they will not welcome our presence." "I'll go," he said without hesitation. "If it means saving this alliance, I'll do whatever it takes." For the first time in days, her skin glowed with a faint gold, a color he now recognized as trust. "Then we go together." As they prepared to depart, whispers of their mission spread through the embassy. Many viewed it as a desperate gamble, while others saw it as an opportunity for redemption. For Joran and Serelith, it was both. They knew the risks, but they also understood what was at stake. The journey ahead would test their bond, their resolve, and their beliefs. But as they boarded the sleek Hylan transport ship, Joran felt a strange sense of calm. He wasn't just a researcher anymore. He was part of something much bigger, a bridge between two worlds, a beacon of hope in a time of uncertainty. And he would not let that hope fade. The Hylan transport ship glided silently through the atmosphere, its sleek, organic form blending seamlessly with the vast silver sky. Inside, Joran sat beside Queen Serelith, the hum of the ship's core a constant undercurrent to their quiet thoughts. Their destination was a Hylan enclave in the Pacific Expanse, a sprawling complex built into a submerged ridge, far from human eyes. It was said to house Hylan dissidents, those who viewed the alliance with humanity as a betrayal of their traditions. The air in the cabin was thick with unspoken tension. Serelith's glowing patterns, usually a steady rhythm of silvers and golds, flickered erratically. Joran had come to understand this as a sign of emotional turbulence. She was worried, though she would never say it aloud. "You've been quiet," Joran remarked, breaking the silence. Serelith's eyes met his, her expression inscrutable. "This mission carries great weight. The decisions made here could determine the future of our people." "No pressure then," he said, attempting a weak smile. It earned him a flicker of violet across her skin, a color he'd come to associate with amusement. "You underestimate your importance, Joran Thal," she said softly. "You are more than a researcher. You are a symbol of what our species can achieve together." Her words, though meant to encourage, only deepened his sense of responsibility. He wasn't just representing himself, He was carrying the hopes of an alliance teetering on the edge of collapse. As the ship descended into the waters of the Pacific, the Enclave came into view. Bioluminescent spires jutted from the ocean floor, their light illuminating the dark depths like an otherworldly reef. The Enclave's design was unmistakably Hylan, its structures pulsating with a living glow that seemed to breathe with the current. Joran and Sarilith disembarked into a cavernous hall where a group of Hylan awaited them. Their leader, a tall figure with obsidian-black skin shot through with streaks of crimson, stepped forward. His patterns radiated a menacing intensity, a stark contrast to Sarilith's calming golds. Queen Sarilith, the leader intoned, his voice resonating with a deep, almost mechanical timbre. To what do we owe this visit? Corvus, Sarilith replied, inclining her head slightly. I come seeking answers. There has been an attack on our embassy, one that threatens to unravel the peace we have worked so hard to build. Corvus's skin pulsed with red, a clear display of defiance. The peace you speak of is a facade. Humanity cannot be trusted, yet you lower yourself to their level, indulging their weakness. Joran bristled but held his tongue. This was Sarilith's domain, and he knew better than to intervene without her lead. Your words carry bitterness, Corvus, Sarilith said, her tone measured. But they do not absolve you. Evidence ties the attack to this enclave. I need the truth. The truth. Corvus's laughter was sharp, cutting through the chamber. The truth is that humanity will betray us as they have betrayed their own. They exploit, they destroy. And you, Queen Sarilith, are blind to their nature. Joran couldn't stay silent any longer. You think you're protecting your people, but all you're doing is fueling mistrust. The alliance isn't perfect, but it's a chance to build something better, for both our species. Corvus turned his piercing gaze to Joran, his crimson streaks flaring. And what would a human know of our struggles? You study us like specimens, never understanding what it means to be Hylan. I've tried, Joran said, his voice steady. And I'll keep trying. But understanding goes both ways. If you destroy this alliance, you destroy any hope of coexistence. For a moment, the chamber was silent, the tension crackling like static. Then Corvus spoke, his tone colder than before. Words will not sway me. If you wish to prove your sincerity, you must face the trial of unity. Sarilith stiffened, her glow dimming. Corvus, that is unnecessary. On the contrary, it is essential, he interrupted. Let this human show us his commitment, or let him be exposed as the hypocrite he is. What's the trial of unity? Joran asked, his voice calm despite the sinking feeling in his stomach. Corvus smiled, a gesture that was anything but kind. It is an ancient test, designed to reveal the true essence of one's character. You will enter the unity pool and confront your deepest fears. Only then will we know if you are worthy. The unity pool was a circular chamber filled with shimmering liquid that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air was thick with an electric charge, and the walls seemed to pulse like a living organism. Sarilith stood beside Joran, her expression grave. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Corvus is using this to humiliate you. Joran shook his head. If it means saving the alliance, I'll do it. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. Be careful. The pool will test more than your resolve. It will test your heart. With a deep breath, Joran stepped into the pool. The liquid was warm, almost soothing, but as he sank deeper, the world around him dissolved. He was no longer in the enclave. He was somewhere else entirely. The visions began almost immediately. He saw Earth as it had been before the Hylan arrived, a planet scarred by war and environmental collapse. He saw humanity's failures laid bare, greed, destruction, betrayal. The images were vivid, unrelenting, and they tore at his soul. Then the visions shifted. He saw the Hylan, proud, powerful, but fractured by internal strife. Their distrust of humanity mirrored humanity's fear of them, a cycle of suspicion and misunderstanding that threatened to consume them both. Amid the chaos, a voice echoed in his mind. What do you fight for, Joran Thal? I fight for understanding, he said aloud. For a future where we see each other as more than enemies. The visions intensified, showing him his own fears, his doubts about whether he was truly capable of bridging the gap between their species. But as he confronted each fear, he felt a growing sense of clarity. He wasn't perfect, But he was willing to try. And sometimes that was enough. When Joran emerged from the pool, his body trembling but his mind clear, the chamber was silent. Corvus stared at him, his crimson patterns subdued. "You have faced the trial," Corvus said reluctantly. "And you have not faltered." Serelith stepped forward, her glow radiant. "Let this be a lesson to us all. Trust is not built on perfection, but on the willingness to confront our flaws together." Corvus lowered his head, his defiance finally giving way. "Perhaps there is merit in your vision, Queen Serelith." The return to the embassy was met with cautious optimism. News of the trial and Joran's success spread quickly, rekindling hope in the alliance. While mistrust still lingered, the cracks in their partnership began to mend. As Joran and Serelith stood together in the council chamber, watching representatives from both species begin to rebuild their fragile trust, Joran felt a sense of accomplishment. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt achievable. "Do you believe we can make this work?" he asked Serelith. She glanced at him, her eyes reflecting a rare warmth. "With allies like you, Joran Thal, I believe anything is possible." And for the first time in years, Joran believed it too.